like to thank you guys all for making this 2-hour trip out to Sartell to visit Dr. Death, also known as Dr. Leonard. Dr. Death is the owner of Men Correctional Facility. Dr. Death, known as Dr. Leonard, or AKA Dr. Death, has Men Medical Correctional is in jails and prisons in over 34 counties in the state of Minnesota. So Dr. Death has been doing pretty good financially, but he hasn't been doing pretty good as a doctor. Recently, Sharrell was in the care of Dr. Death, or Dr. Leonard, and it resulted in his death. There have also been other black and brown bodies who have been in the care of Men Correctional Facility, and it has resulted in death. Today, we have Michelle Gross from Communities United Against Police Brutality. Just real quick, I'm excited and I'm moving a little fast. We're out here today to demand justice for Hardell Sharrell, who was murdered and tortured, in my opinion, in Beltrami County Jail. He was sent to the hospital, and he was in Men Correctional Care as a part of that. So we're here to demand that Governor Tim Walz end the contract with Men Correctional Facility immediately, and that charges be brought against Dr. Death, or AKA Dr. Leonard. Michelle Gross, a social justice activist and a retired nurse, is an organizer and one of the founders of Communities United Against Police Brutality, who does excellent work in our community around police brutality and law enforcement accountability. She's going to come up and talk to us about some letters that were recently uncovered in this new ongoing re-review investigation in the matter of Hardell Sharrell. Give her a round of applause.
Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Michelle Gross and I'm one of the founders and president of Communities United Against Police Brutality, but I'm also a retired nurse and currently a paralegal. I do work primarily in medical cases that have a component of reviewing medical records, and I work for the attorney that is Delcia Perry's attorney. And so I'm extremely familiar with this particular case. In fact, I'll never forget the day that Delcia called me at first because Trahern knew me. And he said, you know, I've got the right person for you to call. And I'll never forget her calling and telling me what had happened to Hardell. And I knew instantly what was wrong. I knew immediately. The first thing I said was, you know, he didn't die from pneumonia. He died from a terrible disease called Guillain-Barré. And Guillain-Barré is a disease that occurs where it's an autoimmune disease where your nervous system is attacked by your immune system after you've had a virus. It's not very common, but it's well known to people who have been in the medical field for a while and who have worked in emergency rooms and in primary care, because it's a known complication of a viral illness such as the flu. And so when she told me what had happened to him, I instantly knew that there was something very, very wrong with what the official word was. And so, I immediately said, no, he died from medical neglect from Guillain-Barré. Guillain-Barré is a survivable illness. It's a progressive paralytic disease that causes your muscles to shut down. They start at your core, and they move down your legs, they move up your body, and eventually you stop being able to breathe. It is not curable, but it is absolutely manageable, and people recover from it if they receive hospitalization. We have to give people supportive care. We have to do things to boost their, to address their immune system and to boost the good parts of their immune system, and we have to support their respiratory system so that they don't shut down and stop breathing. What happened in Hardell's case is that they simply didn't believe anything was wrong. They refused to pay attention to all of the symptoms that he had, which were just pointing to this thing. They refused to pay attention to it, and as a result, they left him laying on the floor for days and days as he suffocated slowly to death and died from lack of care. He also was not given proper nutrition. He went 3 days without food and roughly a day and a half, almost 2 days without any hydration of any kind. And this was well documented on the videos. You know, that's one of the things about jail deaths, is that there's lots of video. And so I looked at probably over 200 videos in reviewing this case. And I can tell you that it was like a nightmare. It really, truly was. What happened to him is unconscionable. And for all of these medical people to know what was happening to him and to walk away and let this go on, because some correction officers, what we call COs, thought that he was faking. You know, you are an independent medical professional. You are supposed to use your professional judgment to make your own decision. You don't allow a corrections officer to tell you what is happening with a person. If there was a person laying on the ground over here, you know, and I drove up and I saw somebody doing CPR on that person, I couldn't just take over CPR, because as a professional, it is my responsibility to do my own assessment. I would do it fast, but then I would begin the CPR, because as medical professionals and paraprofessionals, we're responsible for doing our own assessments. And the idea that you would allow a corrections officer to tell you, he's fake and don't pay any attention to him, and then you ignore the obvious symptoms, the obvious signs that something's going deeply wrong with someone, is appalling to me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you a letter that has been recently uncovered. Delshia is going to give you more of the details about how it became uncovered. But I'm going to read to you a letter, and I'm going to break down the medical parts of this letter for you, okay? This was a letter that was presented by one of the healthcare practitioners that was involved just a little bit in Hardell's case, but enough that she was deeply disturbed by what she saw. And when she tried to get him sent to the hospital, the jail administrator overruled her and said, no, he can't go. And that's another issue. Since when do we allow non-professionals, non-medical professionals, to overrule the judgment of a medical professional? That could happen in a jail or prison is outlandish to me. So I'm going to read this to you. I have been an employee with the company Mend Healthcare for approximately 3 weeks, beginning in mid-August. Technically, I am still in training. On August 31st, I should have been with my boss and Mend owner, physician Dr. Todd Leonard, as I was in training, but Dr. Leonard told me he could not make it till Beltrami that morning, and I would have to go by myself. When I arrived at the Beltrami County Jail, the med tech and the RN advised me there was an inmate who was faking being paralyzed and that I would have to take a look at him. They told me he was even faking being incontinent, and that was why he was wearing adult diapers. I reviewed his chart and noticed that he was consistently hypertensive, which means high blood pressure, in the 150s and 160s over 100s, and that's very high. That's the kind of thing where we really, especially if that lower number is above 100, we want to see somebody in the hospital, okay? And it was tachycardic. And tachycardiac means that there's rapid heart rate, very rapid heart rate.
No. She's got 2 chairs, one for you.
An EKG had been done on August 30th. The EKG read abnormal and inferior infarct. And an inferior infarct means tissue death of the lower part of the heart, typically from a heart attack. So, you know, it's not something to just go, oh, that's a little something to wave by, okay? That he had probably had, along the way, a heart attack. I personally don't have experience reading ECGs, so I asked the RN if Dr. Leonard had seen the ECG. She told me that she read the report to Dr. Leonard over the phone, and he told her that inferior infarct is normal and the ECG is of no concern. And I have to tell you that as a longtime nurse who has taught advanced cardiac life support and pediatric advanced life support, there is no way in hell that that's normal. That is simply not true. You see something like that on anyone, and if you've got any sense at all, you are taking them to the hospital. You simply cannot ignore a symptom like that. What it means is literally part of his heart, the bottom part of his heart has died. So this is so outlandish. When I read this, I just couldn't believe it. I asked her if the patient was on any medication for hypertension. She told me he was on lisinopril on the outside. So that's an anti-high blood pressure drug. I asked her why he was not on anything currently, and she told me he wasn't on any medication because he was saying that he was having trouble swallowing. That's an advanced symptom, again, of Guillain-Barré syndrome. The RN told me that on August 30th, Dr. Leonard advised the RN to send Hardell to the local emergency room, but the jail administrator vetoed it, saying after she had listened to Hardell's phone conversations with his family, she believed he was a flight risk. This is a guy who couldn't move his legs now, okay? Keep that in mind. I was brought to Hardell's cell by the RN, followed by a correctional staff worker. On the way, we stopped at control where the other officers were speaking very negatively about Hardell, saying he was faking his situation. When I got to Hardell's cell, I was overwhelmed by the stench. It smelled heavily of urine and sweat. Hardell was laying on his back on the floor. He was on a mat full of urine and drenched in sweat. He was wearing a diaper that was soaked with urine, the urine then soaking the mattress pad underneath him. When I looked at Hardell, I immediately noticed that the right side of his mouth was drooping. That's a neurologic symptom, again, consistent with Guillain-Barré. That's a situation where when you see a person's mouth drooping, you start to think of strokes, you start to think of cranial nerve injuries, things like that. Those are very, very frightening symptoms. These are not symptoms to be ignored. When he spoke with me, his words were slightly slurred. He looked at me and he asked me to please believe him that something was wrong. He told me no one was believing him. He told me he felt numb from his waist down. Again, another symptom of Guillain-Barré. He said he had pain in his back. Yet another symptom of Guillain-Barré. He asked if he could have his diaper changed and have clean clothes. He said the officers were refusing to change his diaper and clothes or help him clean up. I asked him what was the last time he ate or drank something. He told me he could not eat because something was wrong with his swallowing. Again, another symptom of more advanced symptom of Guillain-Barré. He said his throat felt weird and that it was difficult to swallow. He said the day before I saw him, he was able to drink 2 small containers of apple juice with assistance from an RN. During that time, though, on the video, you can see that he's complaining about choking. He's having difficulty getting that material down the apple juice down his throat. The RN was getting Hardell's vital signs with the machine as I was speaking with him. He was tachycardic with a heart rate of 132. We consider 90 to be tachycardic, so he was very tachycardic. His blood pressure was hypertensive. I cannot remember the exact numbers. His O2 saturation was 83 or 84. O2 means oxygen, and that's a measure of how much oxygen is in your blood. We treat people at 94%. He was at 83 or 84%, which means he was hardly getting any oxygen to his brain at all. And that is really a serious sign. It shows his respiratory system was shutting down at that point. Go to the emergency room immediately, and that I was concerned that he had had a stroke. I was told the only way he is going to the hospital was in a deputy vehicle with armed officers. While I waited for the correctional staff, I directed that Hardell be changed into clean clothes and that his diaper be changed. The RN started to put on a new diaper and new clothes. The correctional staff would not help change the inmate. I was assessing him and noticed that his body was cold, but he was extremely diaphoretic. So diaphoresis means sweat. He was sweating crazy, but his body was cold. So clearly some things were going wrong. And when you see those kind of heart rates, respiratory rates, blood pressure, diaphoresis, those things indicate what we call a autonomic nervous system disorder. And that means basically that his nervous system was shutting down at that point. And basically, you know, he had no Babinski reflex, meaning his nerves in his feet weren't working. His grasp reflex was... I started to help the RN put new clothes on, which was difficult as he was like moving dead weight. While rolling him slightly, Hardell was crying out in pain. The officers at some point brought a wheelchair for Hardell. The RN was upset they into the wheelchair, so she went down to control and asked officers to help lift him into the chair. The wheelchair did not have rest for his legs. When Hardell was getting changed into clean clothes, I remember to please don't let the officers touch him. He was also crying from his eyes when he pleaded with me to get him help. He told me that he was scared. He stated that he wanted to speak with his family. That night, I had trouble sleeping as I thought about the found Hardell. I contemplated as how and to whom I should speak. I was just grateful that he got to a hospital. That was Friday evening, August 31st, and a long holiday weekend followed. I did not find out that Hardell had passed away until yesterday, September 4th. I was training at another jail with Dr. Leonard. He was sitting with me as we were received a phone call, and I heard him tell whoever he was speaking with that there had been a death in the Beltrami County Jail. My heart sunk because I knew it was probably Hardell. When Dr. Leonard got off the phone, he told me he was 30. Not to tell me Hardell had died on Sunday night. He told me that Hardell had been medically cleared from the emergency room. He told me that they did a thorough examination and CT scan, which found nothing. I told Dr. Leonard that I disagreed, that there was nothing wrong. I told him that the vital signs and the ECGs don't lie, which are both of which are consistently abnormal with Hardell. I also told him that I was very confident that when it comes to my clinical judgment and that something was very wrong with Hardell, he was very sick. Dr. Leonard told me, quote, not to jump to conclusions, and he said that jumping to conclusions could jeopardize his company. That's what he had to talk about. He also, at a different point, told her to tell people that if they asked, that he had stuck a sock down his throat. Wow. So that's the quality of medical care that people get at Men Medical. Hardell is not by any means the only person that has been harmed by Men Medical, but and he's not even the only person that's died from Men Medical. In my personal opinion, I believe that Dr. Leonard should have his license pulled, and I believe that he should go to prison for criminal medical negligence.
Yes.
That is my belief.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Ladies and gentlemen, this type of medical care, no matter if you're in, because you go to jail, Hardell didn't even go to court yet. So Hardell didn't even get sentenced for anything. So going to jail should not be a death sentence. Inmates deserve proper medical care just like any other citizen in America. So Dr. Leonard should definitely go to jail if he's telling nurses to cover up evidence. And this is what we've been talking about for a long time, is the art of the cover-up. But now we're starting to see how it works. Now we're starting to see that it's not just jails involved in the art of the cover-up, but it's also correctional care that is supposed to give care to inmates. So the lawyer for Delshia Perry is here, Mr. Zoloff. Mr. Zoloff, if you could come up and say a couple words.
Oh.
Hello everyone, my name is Zohar Lederman. I represent Ms. Perry and Hardell Sharrell in a case that we have filed in federal court against Beltrami County Men Medical Care. I came here today more as a support for Delshia than a lawyer. She's been fighting this fight for almost 2 years now, nonstop. She had back surgery last fall, and she was fighting even from a hospital bed. So we're here to remind staff at Men Medical Care, Dr. Leonard, and anyone else who provides medical care for jail inmates in Minnesota jails, that humane medical care is required by the United States Constitution. It's not a choice, it's not an option, and people who are in jail have a right to receive humane medical treatment. And if people are providing care in the state that aren't able to offer that sort of treatment, then officials, elected officials in our state, have to take action to make that change. Again, I came here as a show of support. I won't say anything further at this time, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah. When it comes to the lawsuit in general, Men was listed on the lawsuit. I think some doctors were as well. There's specific evidence that sort of points to their negligence. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the case that we have filed involves MEND. It involves Beltrami County and its various officers and administrative staff. Also involves Sanford Health. With respect to MEND, the allegations in the complaint pertain to generally Hardell's last 2 days of his life. which he lived suffering in his own urine on the jail. He came back from the hospital with specific instructions, discharge instructions. He came back with a list of symptoms, and the instructions were clear. If these symptoms develop or if they get worse, he would immediately. When he came back from the hospital, he continued to deteriorate to the point where he was essentially limp. He was brought back to a cell, to an observation cell. Several hours later, he fell off the bunk. This is on video. This isn't a theory we have. You can watch this on video. He is left at that point on the floor in that same position for hours until somebody finally came in the morning to check on him. Never placed back into bed. He was left on the floor. Continued to deteriorate. His entire body shut down. He was unable to move completely anymore at that point. He was paralyzed on the jail floor. Eventually, Hardell's respiratory organs gave out. He was unable to breathe anymore. This is very sad to say, but he died a very slow and painful death. This is a person who could literally no longer have the energy and the capacity to breathe. This is what our case is about, and this is what the claims against Maine medical care pertain to, is the fact that he came back from the hospital, he continued to deteriorate, he continued to show signs of basically his entire body shutting down, and he was never brought back to the emergency room as he should have. If he was brought back to the ER, we have evidence indicating that he could have been saved. He could have been with us here today. You know, we don't have a death penalty here in Minnesota. People who end up in jail for whatever reason should be in that jail on their own 2 feet the same way they came in. And that's what our case is about. We demand humane medical care for people that are in Minnesota jails, and we're going to keep fighting until that happens. Absolutely. To leave a person paralyzed on the jail floor who can't breathe, who can't move, who is urinating and defecating on himself, to leave him to suffer that way and to die due to the fact that he just couldn't breathe anymore is absolutely cruel and unusual.
Your thoughts on the FBI?
We're grateful for the efforts that were made over the last several months. This is the byproduct of Del Shia continuing to fight and never giving up. Like I said, she started this fight from day one, and she hasn't ever stopped. She's been fighting for the truth. We've been looking for answers, and finally, just with a combination of things, we were able to provide to local authorities sort of a summary of what's been happening at Beltrami County Jail over the last 4 years. We were able to uncover this letter that was read to you several minutes ago. All of these events were happening over the last 2 weeks, and they culminated in Department of Corrections requesting that the federal authorities start investigating what's happening at Beltrami County Jail. We're grateful for that, and we are absolutely certain that the investigation will reveal a ton of evidence pertaining to our case, pertaining to Beltrami County, and pertaining to similar situations where young people who should be leaving the jail, like I said, on their own 2 feet, are dying unnecessarily, leaving mothers without children, leaving their children behind, and unable to provide for their families due to the fact that they come into jail and they leave on a gurney.
Do you believe there's a pattern of this type of shot here across the facilities that men visit?
God, this girl.
We got you.
I will. I'll respond to that in terms of just directing you to review other cases. I can't speak to a pattern personally, but if you take a look at other pending cases that are currently being litigated against men, against Beltrami County Jail, you can make your own conclusions about whether or not there is a pattern.
clarification on the letter that was read. Can you just describe who that was from again?
The letter that was read to you was written by a MEND employee. She was one of the last medical staff at the jail to see Hardell alive. She saw him on August 31st. She saw him before he was taken to the emergency room, and she did not see him since then. So this is a woman who worked at MEND, who submitted what was read to you is a complaint that she submitted to the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office, asking for an investigation to be completed into what happened to Hardell. Why this letter was not referenced or mentioned anywhere in the autopsy report is a question that we should all ask the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office.
Right.
Yep.
And we're going there next.
That's right. We're going to go after the Ramsey County Medical Examiner. Minnesota Nursing Board, we're coming after the Minnesota Board of Medical Practice. What is happening in these agencies? That information was provided 2 years ago almost. And as far as we know, nothing is happening. Where is action? Why are people dying after the information was submitted to these agencies, asking them to help?
What did the autopsy report show as cause of death?
Can you say that again, ma'am?
What did the autopsy report show as cause of death?
The autopsy report doesn't indicate a cause of death. The autopsy report found that Hardell had pneumonia. He did not have pneumonia when he went to the ER 2 days prior to his death. So the autopsy report doesn't provide any sort of clear indication of what the cause of death was. Several diagnoses without indicating what, if anything, caused Hardell's death. We hired our own independent pathologist who died Hardell. That is the cause of death. All of the symptoms that he had are consistent with this condition. Unfortunately, nobody cared enough to pay attention and see the very obvious signs and symptoms that he was exhibiting.
Thank you.
Thank you all again for coming.
Thank you.
See, and these are the type of attorneys we need.
Yes.
I'm gonna refer you to my man right there because he's doing a good job. He's not out in the media all the time. He's not out on talk shows a lot, but he's doing the work. Michelle Gross is doing the work. Delcia Perry stepping up, doing the work. We like to thank all of you guys, the news stations that came out here. Unicorn Riot. This is work to travel 2 hours outside of a city to come and confront a corrupt medical facility who is doing work in over 34 counties in the state of Minnesota. I can't say this as like this is fact, but from people that I've talked to who are in different jails, this is the pattern that men has had, period, in other jails across the state of Minnesota. So right now we're going to hear from Delcia Perry, the mother of Hardell Sharrell, and she's just going to give you some updates and just let you know how she feels about Dr. Death and Dr. Leonard and what she thinks should happen to him.
First, I want to give God the glory. For this is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. And for bad and for my good. I'm not going to allow the enemy to steal my joy and to continue to have me suffer in depression another day. He has stolen enough from me, which was my best friend, my little guy, the jokester of the family. My mom called him hard to tell. She said that it was hard to tell what he was going to do next. He loved people so much. He'd give the shirt off his back. He tried to follow in my footsteps as an evangelist. And he would give people on the street food. He would help anybody that he could. He always had a very positive attitude in life. He always saw the cup half full. And even as an evangelist, he would have to help me to see things in a different perspective. That's just who he was. He loved basketball and he was good at it. But that really wasn't what he wanted to do. Hardell had made up in his mind that this last time he had gone to jail, he said, "Mama, I'm so sorry. I let you down." And I said to Hardell, I said, "You know what, Hardell? You have to walk your path in your life. You have to walk out your own soul salvation, as everyone does." I said, "But you know, I just thank God for you because, you know, he was there for me when we were struggling and had hardly anything. Hardell would go get, you know, nickel and dime jobs to help around the house. He was just a giving guy. He was such a loving guy. And he was always making jokes. He was always making jokes. He would be like, "Ma, I got you, Ma, don't worry." Well, he told me, and I'll share with you later, a poem that he tells me now that God's got me. And I'm so grateful. But Hardell was a very kind young man. Yes, he made some mistakes. That's why he was in jail. But I am sick and tired of the media spinning negativity and telling the negatives of why they were in custody or why they were in jail. We obviously know there was a crime committed. We don't need you to focus on the negative. Focus on what happened. Let's keep the main focus the main focus. Can you guys do that? Can the media please do that? Is it not hard enough for mothers and fathers and other loved ones who've lost loved ones to tragic incidents like my son, to not have to then go out and defend his honor and defend him? He's not here to defend himself. So please put the right spin on the story, which is TRUTH, truth. That's all I'm fighting for, is the truth to be told. And that's why I came out here, and I thank everybody for coming out here and supporting us. I know this trip was a little ways out of the Twin Cities, but I thank God for each and every one of you guys that came out to show solidarity with me to take MEND down. Because MEND needs to come to an end. End MEND now. It is hard as a mother to stand here and tell you what happened to my son without getting teary-eyed. It's hard to fight and grieve and fight. And I am sick and tired of what Minnesota has been doing to our African American men and the African American women that we haven't even heard of. A couple of family members that came out today are Amity and John, and their son Kobe was taken too early. His life was snatched and stolen by police. And we are gathering together and we are coming together in solidarity, and we are saying enough is enough. I hope that while this media is out here today, that they would focus and get their story. I am not just here to tell you about what happened to Hardell. I am the voice for those that are still incarcerated, that have been neglected and abused, and I hope and pray that they get out and that they can tell their story. That they don't die. They're not killed like my son was. Hardell did not deserve what they did to him. His crime is irrelevant to what they did to my baby. When he died, a big part of me died as well. And I will fight for justice until the day I die, until we get what we deserve. His 3 little girls don't have a father. They don't have a father to take them to a daughter-daddy dance. They don't have a father to see them through their graduations of middle school, high school, and college. They don't have a father to walk them down the aisle and give them away. MEND and Beltrami County Jail and Sanford Medical stole that from us. But I say no more. No more. We will continue to fight for those that have lost their lives in Beltrami County Jail. I happen to be very dear friends with, I call her Mama May. Tony May Jr.'s mom lost her son, and to senseless killing is what I call it. Our children were all murdered by the hands of the Beltrami County officers and men correctional care. What care? It just needs to come to an end. Care? That's a joke. They didn't even get care. They didn't get basic medical care. Another gal, Stephanie Bunker. My heart goes out to her mom. And I just, again, another person that did not have to die like she did. I'm not going to get into her story only because I don't know all of the facts. But I know that it was under suspicious circumstances. All of the deaths that my attorney mentioned to you in the letter that he sent out to the governor and Keith Ellison to get this investigation underway. 5 people died in a very short period of time in Beltrami County Jail. 1 death was too much. You're talking 5 and 3 in consecutive years. It's a pattern. And I can't even find words to describe how in the report that we got that this Dr. Leonard said that he probably killed himself by giving himself a blood clot. How does that happen, Michelle?
You can't even give yourself a blood clot.
You can't give yourself a blood
You
clot.
cannot give yourself a blood clot.
Comes in and he says, oh, well, maybe he stuck a sock down his throat. Is that possible, Michelle?
No, not when you're paralyzed.
Absolutely, because he couldn't swallow saliva. How could he
How
swallow a sock?
Exactly.
I think he needs
was
medical.
paralyzed.
He needs medical help. He needs a medical evaluation. The doctor needs a medical evaluation. In fact, I'd like to ask him where he got his doctorates, his PhD degree.
Medical degree, yeah.
Where did he up? Because I don't know. But maybe from a bubblegum machine, I don't know. But I do know this. He should not be practicing now. He should not be practicing now. His license needs to be stripped now.
Yes.
Men needs to end now.
Yes.
Because we cannot allow yet another person's life to be stolen again in Beltrami County Jail or any other jail for that matter. We're talking about a 150-bed unit in Beltrami County, and you're talking about 3 consecutive deaths? That's way too many for that small of a facility. I'm sure Hennepin County hasn't even had that many deaths, and Hennepin County's got, how many beds are in Hennepin County? Zoroslav, do you know? They're much bigger than Beltrami County.
875.
875. Thank you very much, Michelle. 875 beds. And they probably haven't had 1 death in the last probably 2 years. I'm going to do my research on it. But what I know has happened in Beltrami County Jail is evil, wicked, wicked evil. And they need to shut Beltrami County Jail down. I have been saying it, and I will continue to say it. I don't know who needs to make the executive orders, how this works. I don't know the law. I tell my attorney that all the time. I say, you know what? You know the law, but I know the Lord. But together, we can do some damage, some real damage. We make a pretty good team, I got to tell you that. I love my attorney and his team, Michelle and them. Oh my goodness, I tell you, I thank God that God allowed them to come and represent Hardell Sharrell. I don't know what I would have done if I'd had another attorney, because I just don't know. I just thank God I've got them working for us. Trayon, my brother with Black Lives Matter, has been very key in why I'm standing here as well today. Let me not give him his props. He has been out here marching, protesting well before George Floyd died on my behalf. As you heard my attorney say, when I was in my hospital bed from having a major back surgery, and I couldn't go out and rally. My brother was out there rallying for me. And then when people saw me come back out, because they hadn't seen me in a while, they're like, oh, they're probably like, oh, now she's out. You have no idea. And what I tell people is this. If you only know half the story, you need to. And when Medea rises up in me, I want to say something else, but I'm not going to do that. Because I am a child of the Most High God. I would like to say that if it hadn't been for a man named Paul Schnell, the DOC commissioner, Paul Schnell, we went out there. Nico does an amazing job. The videos that you all have seen on YouTube were done by Nico. Amazing journalist.
Thank you.
We want to make sure we give Nico his props. Some of you all, I don't know, I just met you all. I'll have to see what y'all can do. I know what he can do. And he's going to tell the truth. He's going to get it out there. And so I thank God for Nico. And it was a hard interview. And as you know, any time a mother talks about losing her child in such a horrific way, it is very hard to talk about it because we're reliving their death all over again. And it's like, God, when do I get to grieve? Because we're out here fighting. We don't have time to grieve. We're busy fighting. And that's just not right. It's not fair. We shouldn't have to fight for what's right when what you did was wrong.
Right.
And so I wanted to say, you know, Paul Schnell, we went out to the DOC. Nico showed up. Traren, of course, was there. Several of Hardell's friends came. And we went to go and confront Gray Croucher, who was at the time the lead inspector over Hardell's death. And I want to make sure that the media can take a picture of this because it's very important, because I'm going to make a point about it. But this is his first review. Traren, maybe you could get a close-up of that and then share that with them. I'm making a point in saying that Gray Croucher did a inspection on the death of my son. It's a paragraph long. And he did it 2 months after my son died. And guess what, folks? They said there were no violations.
Really?
I said, you got to be kidding me. Well, I knew what my attorney and Michelle were telling me, that was a lie from the pit of hell. And I wasn't buying it. I said, but we got to do something about this because we got to get the truth, Traren. I said, Traren said, well, sis, we need to go ask Gray Croucher. We need to go confront Gray Croucher. So that's what we did. We went over to the DOC, and that's exactly what we did. But when we got there, we come to find out that Gray Croucher left. Oh, he's not here anymore? We were shocked. They wouldn't tell us why he wasn't there, but you know, we can all about assume why. And Paul Schnell did a re-review. And I said, Paul, when I first met him, I said, your name is Paul? I said, your mama didn't make no mistake by naming you Paul. Do you know who you are in Christ Jesus? He said, yeah. I said, well, all right, Apostle Paul, let's wrap this up. We got to do this thing right. And he told me, I didn't come out of retirement because I wanted to take this job. I came out of retirement because I wanted to do what's right. I said, now that's what I'm talking about. Now somebody's talking, making some sense out of something that wasn't making sense. Because that report was nothing but a made-up lie. This report, 5 pages long, is the truth. And it is all detailed in what happened and what didn't happen. And in fact, for the record, Paul Schnell just said there were so many violations, he couldn't even name them all in a 5-page report. Hello, but yet we got a report here that says there were no violations. How can that be? That's impossible, isn't it? And what I want to just read in his, if you just give me a moment. He says here,
Beyond the obvious problem of non-compliance with jail policies and the corresponding jail standards is the fact that no one seemed to question the assumptions made about Mr. Sharrell's condition. In fact, the treating physician at Sanford Health included in his discharge summary that worsening weakness, difficulty standing, paralysis, loss of control of the bladder or bowels, or difficulty what? Wait, what is that? Karen, can you help me? What does that word say? Difficulty what? What does that word say? Difficulty what?
Swallowing.
Wait, say what? Difficulty what?
Swallowing.
Swallowing. Difficulty swallowing? What? Difficulties should result in immediate medical attention being sought. Michelle, didn't you just read the report? And the nurse said he was having, he couldn't take his medication because what? Couldn't swallow. We didn't even have to list everything that was wrong if we just listed the he couldn't swallow part. But they said there were no violations. I don't understand. So now we've got, I'm gonna call it what it is, the smoking gun. The letter that Michelle Gross just read to you from this nurse who was so disturbed by what she had seen, and how that got found was we were investigation through Paul Schnell's office, and after Paul Schnell realized, and we said, well, this needs to be investigated. Like, people are dying and they're senseless. I'm gonna call it what it is. They're being murdered in Beltrami County Jail, and nobody seems to care about it. When you got death after death after, you know that there are 3 major lawsuits going on pending right now against men and Beltrami County Jail. Just if in case y'all didn't know that. 3. That's a lot of lawsuits. I like the number 3 though. That's the number Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. I love that number. So that means God gonna show up and show out. Watch what I tell you. But at any rate, he said no violations in his report. And now here we have a plethora of not just minor violations, but gross violations as well. And Paul said, we need to start this investigation. After they told my attorney what he needed to do to get Attorney General Keith Ellison involved, and write a letter to himself and the governor to get the governor to make an executive order to do an investigation, a full-blown investigation into Beltrami County Jail. About a week or so after that, Paul Schnell said that the investigation's already well underway. I said, well, praise the Lord. They didn't waste any time about it. And so Paul, I guess, decided to start within his office this conflicting information. What better place to start than right there at home, right? So I guess he went through files and in the complaint file, and that letter that Michelle wrote was in that drawer. But I spoke to the young lady because I was desperate to find out what was it that my son said before he died. I know that he died 2 days after she went to visit with him. And I wanted to just talk to her personally and ask her what he said. And she was so, she said that his death has haunted her from that day. And there isn't a day that goes by that she doesn't think about how he suffered. She held his hand. She assured him she would get help. He said to her, please don't leave me with these correctional officers. I'm afraid. Please don't leave me alone with these correctional officers. And he's like, can't defend himself. He's crying. He can barely speak. And as she's telling me this, she says, well, you're just finding this out now? I said, yeah, we got this in an investigation from the DOC. She said, oh my God, I wrote those letters back 3 days after Hardell died. In fact, I called Ramsey County Medical Examiner's office 3 days after Hardell's death and told them what happened. And then I wrote it up because is it not cardinal rule that nurses are supposed to document everything, Michelle?
Absolutely.
So she did an excellent job. She not only wrote the Ramsey County Medical Examiner's Office this letter, she wrote the DOC this letter, which is where it was found, but she also, in turn, wrote the nurses board, the same letter, and she wrote the medical board of physicians, the same letter. But yet, only 2 of them have surfaced. Only 2 of these letters have surfaced. And so we're waiting to see where the other 2 are going to show up, because they're going to show up. And I'm going to tell you this, heads are going to roll, because as you heard my attorney say, the DOJ is now investigating this with the U.S. Attorney, as well as the FBI, the DOC, the BCA. Everybody's all over this story now. But here I was, when my baby first died. I was knocking on every door I could knock on. I was calling everybody I knew to call. I kept praying, and kept praying, and kept believing, that one day God, his hand would turn this around for me. And surely we are seeing a turnaround now, because what goes on in the dark shall come to light. And I thank God that I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. He's my God. He's my personal Savior. He is my everything. And if I didn't have him as my rock, I'd probably be in a mental facility. Because a lot of mothers that have spoken to me and have heard my son's story have said, oh my God, how can you do what you do? How do you do that? And the only answer I can give them is to say, it is nothing but the grace of God that allows me to stand to tell my story. Again, I thank everybody for showing up. I do have a poem that I would like to read. It is a poem that my son came to me 4 months after he died and spoke this to me. He woke me up at 3 a.m. And if you'd just be so kind to give me a few more moments of your time, I'd be very appreciative. A minute. Yep. Surely I had to type it up. And then after I read this poem, and I want to say that this poem should encourage every mother like myself who has lost a child or a loved one to violence and corrupt law enforcement, because that's what I'm dealing with, a corrupt system. And then after I read the poem, if you have any questions for me, feel free, but I would like for those that have come to stay a little while longer, because I want to protest right here in, we won't go very far, but I got some things that other folks around Dr. Leonard need to hear. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd really appreciate your presence in that. Mama C, I've been set free. I see the hole that's in your heart. Trust and believe God is mending that hole and healing that spot, because it's God's amazing work of art. I know there were many times that you stayed awake at night crying and praying for me to see the light and go in the right direction. But see, Mama, all those prayers you prayed provided me with many years of protection, because I should have been dead long, long ago when the devil tried to take me, but God stepped in and said no. So I thank the good Lord I had a praying mama, one who never gave up on me, but trust and believe through your prayers, Mama, I've been set free. I know it's hard to believe I'm gone, thinking back on when I was really, really young. God blessed us with a lot of good memories, just you and me. But you gotta hold on knowing that I've been set free. God knew my time was coming near, but during my last few days of life, I had no fear, because he was there with me, lending an ear and holding me dear. So please, Mama, please, don't you shed another tear. Now you go do what the Lord wants you to do, because God's got me and he's got you too. I ask that you ease your mind and let him take you places you never thought you'd see. So please, Mama, please, don't worry about me. I'm free from all hurt and all pain. Your prayers were never in vain, because the Lord came and got me and set me free. Now you go be who he created you to be, so that other sons' mamas would be set free. Thank you.
What do we want?
Justice!
What do we want?
Justice! Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
So what you're hearing and what you just heard is what we're talking about when we talk about institutional racism. MEND is an institution that works with other government institutions, and they have practiced institutional racism that has resulted in death. And this is what has been going on in America for over 400 years, and this is why we're demanding full and complete reparations from Donald Trump and the American government. And we want Governor Tim Walz to close MEND Correctional Facility, and we want Beltrami County Jail to be not only closed, but we want the building to be knocked down. There was an inspection at Beltrami County Jail last summer that found that the building is it's only like 20 years old, but because of all the damage, it's like 200 years old. It has leaks. It has urinals, men urinals in the female part of the jail. There's walls that need to be knocked down. So instead of just knocking down one wall, they need to knock down the whole jail and start over. So we're gonna go walk around this space, hold this space for a couple more minutes. And again, we're real glad that you all came out and made it out here. If anybody has any questions for Delcia, though, ask them now, please. Personal question, how is Hardell's baby? How is it?
Thank you for asking that, Nico. A lot of people tend to forget to ask about the babies, but I certainly do appreciate you asking. His firstborn, whose name is Kalia, struggles the worst. His lastborn is 4, so they're much younger. They don't quite understand 6-year-old and 4-year-old. They know their daddy died, but that's pretty much all they know. But the 8-year-old said to me when George Floyd was murdered, she said, "Grandma, how come you're not out there talking about my daddy? My daddy is not on the news like that guy. How come you're not telling him about my daddy and what happened?" 8-year-old, imagine that. And I looked at my baby and I said, "Honey, Grandma is out there. I am out there talking about your daddy. I talk about your daddy all the time. Grandma just doesn't get in the news all the time. But just because you don't see me on the news doesn't mean we're not talking about your daddy." She said to me, "I wish I could go and see my daddy in heaven." And I said, "No, baby, you can't go right now. You got to stay here and help Grandma. I need help. You got to stay here. You can't go and see your daddy right now." And it's questions like that that just tear me apart. I sometimes don't even have words for them, you know, and I just keep praying and asking God to give me the words for them. A lot of times I don't even have anything to say. I just hug them and I tell them, "This is from your dad. This is a hug from your dad." You know, but we keep them in prayer, and we try to do things with them to keep their minds off of what's going on. We try to keep them away from the televisions, of course, so that they don't see a lot of what's been going on in the media. I know that they will eventually grow up one day and see all of the horrific videos, and I will just have to tell them that just like Emmett Till's mama had to make that decision to show what happened to her son and leave that casket open, I had to let the truth be known so that they could not hide what they had done to your father. I remember one day, and I'll just say this last piece, we went to the cemetery and we get there, and again, Kalia says, "Grandma, Grandma, back up, you're stepping on Daddy. Don't step on Daddy, Grandma." That was the first time she'd gone to a cemetery, and she was bawling her eyes out.
And I just had to explain to her, yes, baby, his body is there, but he's in heaven. He's gone, he's in heaven. You can't hurt him. Nobody can hurt your daddy anymore. Nobody. And so those are the kinds of things that I have to say to encourage my babies. And we do. We try to get them as involved in positive things and different activities to try to keep their minds off of things. But I know that they will eventually need medical, help they will need because of depression and things of that nature. God knows I don't want to put that in the atmosphere, but it is a reality because when they see the videos, when they grow up and see those videos, I know they'll be devastated. Any other questions? Thank you, Nico, for asking that. No other questions? All right, well, thank you again for you guys all coming out and shedding light on the truth, because that's what this is, the truth. And those of you who need to go can go, but we would like, if you could, stay with us for just a while we march down here and come back around neighbors to hear exactly what Dr. Leonard did. Thank you, you guys.